Okay, we wanted to start today with really letting you know that we heard your feedback. 144 last time we checked. I haven't checked in with Megan in the last hour or so, but 144 people last time I checked completed the survey, which is quite a nice return rate on the survey. We really appreciate that. Please keep that up. And so first thing I want to say is just acknowledging that, as Brene Brown recently described in her first podcast, it's called Unlocking Us, this is an FFT. And for this audience, I'll say a flippin' first time. It's the flippin' first time I've done something like this, and that Megan and I have worked together to try to make this happen. We are learning as we go. We are willing to be vulnerable and try it on. We didn't want to wait till we knew how to do it because the time invited us to do this now. So we're just doing that, but we're going to keep reminding ourselves that this is a FFT, and when you're in an FFT, you're not going to have all the skills developed. So one of the things we wanted to talk about was there's a lot of question about the chat, as you can tell from your ability to raise your hand and say hi to me, that the chat function is open today. We want to talk about that a little bit though. So last time and at the beginning, we actually, that was a thoughtful decision to close the chat last week. We made that decision to close it for a couple of reasons that we just want to tell you about. One is it's to keep the environment safer, as the chat was then being able to be moderated. And unfortunately, in some learning spaces on campus and with people bombing in from other places, there's been online bullying and disruption of teaching. And so in many places, they're trying to weigh out the need to moderate versus the need to have communication. So that's why it was turned down, one reason. The other is to make sure that people weren't chatting and wanting to be tended to when Megan is both tending to chat and also Q&A and the polls and helping me. And so she didn't really want somebody left unattended to, which I appreciate the spirit of that. And another factor is that I have ADD, and if I'm trying to deal with too much, my brain gets very scrambled and I can't focus. Like a moving fan, just very rapid. So we also closed it down for me. So, but we're pairing that out with the feedback that we got that for you, it really meant that you wanted to the chat open so you could feel more in community, which I appreciate, and that it could be more like a conversation, like coming to one of my classes, which I totally dig, and that you were a community of learners. And so taking that really important feedback, we're going to try a hybrid approach. So just so you know how this is going to go, the chat function is open to you. I'm going to open my chat when I ask a chat question, because I do want to be in dialogue with you and I want to be in dialogue mode. And then when we're done with that dialogue, I'm going to shut my chat so that I can be in presenter mode and maintain my focus. Or I will get hella distracted, as my daughter calls it. Megan will generally be keeping her eye on the chat, but we can't make a promise because she might be distracted and goes really fast. So if you have a question or a concern that you want to be addressed, I want you to use the Q&A function, because that will pop up to Megan differently and we can make sure that your sound issue or your this or that gets taken care of. If you want to say something to me, you can do that privately, chat just to me privately, and I'll be able to check that out later. The last thing I want to say is just to be mindful about the chat, because on Facebook Live, when I've been watching a concert or something, there's just kind of a constant stream of what I would call chatter versus mindful offering to the conversation about the learning. So I'm wanting mindful chat versus chatter. So having said that, that's kind of what my thought is about chat. So some people wanted more interaction. Some people thought it was just perfect. So I'm just aware that some of you are feeling that. Additionally, some folks wanted me to move back so that you could actually see my wonderful hand gestures. I will try to do both of that. The reason why I can't be all the way back is I can't see. So we'll be balancing that as well. Some folks really wanted the slide deck ahead of time. Megan and I talked about that. I was like, okay, we can put the slide deck in at least the day before or the night before, like before I go to bed on Thursday, because I'm working on these in real time. And I can still do that. Just know that it might still be slightly modified because I modified this slide deck literally 10 minutes before broadcasting. So I will put it in there Thursday night. There might be some slight modifications to slides that happen Friday morning when I have my fresh pot of coffee equivalent, which for me is Diet Pepsi. Some folks wanted me to slow down, so I'm going to, just continue to try to be mindful of that. And not to put as much content in today, to try to do one piece very thoroughly, rather than trying to feel like I have too much to fit into the time that I created. The 6 hours, somebody said, why 6 sessions? That was a question they had. Honestly, it's like I didn't think people would participate if it was longer. I wanted to keep it kind of short, but there's a lot to say. So it was kind of arbitrary, and I'm just going to try to fit the best amount of stuff I can in the hours that we got created. I will say also, just because I'm thinking of it right now, a lot of folks got waitlisted. I know a lot of folks from Extension got waitlisted. They should already have a link to a new class. We're going to offer a second option that'll start next Thursday, and that's going to start being open to non-waitlisted people on Monday afternoon. So if you know people, make sure you let them know. That should be on our Facebook pages for registration. And another question was people saying, like, does it have to be an hour and a half? Can it be an hour? And I want to say that an hour and a half works in terms of the amount of content that I have, but I also know that you shouldn't maybe just be sitting and looking at a screen for an hour and a half. So if you need to take a break, take a break. If you need to get up and move, often when I'm in meetings, I'm doing weights and stuff over here. Do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself in this process. And always remember that I would like to have people here and engaged in it, but it's also being recorded. So if after an hour you've got to go, just trust that our intent is anyway that you'll be able to come back and look at that recording. Moving on to some of what you said that you really appreciated, because I just want to amplify that a lot of you said that you appreciated just having the opportunity to do this, to carve time out of your day and out of your work to kind of have some self-focus, and that the university, particularly my office and Extension, working together to provide this opportunity for you. Many folks really appreciated kind of my normalizing that it's hard, that life is hard, that this isn't easy breezy, yippee skippy thing we're trying to do. If we're going to have a full, complete life, we're going to move through hard. And the focus on really accepting that and navigating the hard more effectively, moment to moment, having more moments where we're navigating the hard effectively. Also, an echo for the appreciation of really taking time to feel what's happening. Some folks have been really in their head, and it was the first opportunity to kind of drop into their heart. So yes, we want to be wholehearted as we move through this time. In equal parts, people really appreciated the practical skills. That was heartwarming for me to see, because I really do want it to be something that's useful and effective for you on a day-to-day basis. Pretty equal parts, people appreciating the mud mine jar, and here it is again, and slightly improved because I remembered to put the glue in it that allows it to settle a little better. But really appreciating, I'm hoping some of you noticed moments when you were really, I had one where I was like this, walking down a road, and my wife said to me, put her hand on my back very lovingly and said, do you remember what you teach? And it was not snarky at all. It was just beautiful. And I was like, oh, yeah. I got triggered, and I got worried, and I got Mama Bear worried. And then I a little pressured. I wanted her to do something, and her wisdom was like, no, maybe not. And she was totally right, by the way. And in a very short amount of time, I was able to settle, reconnect, appreciate her help, not be defensive or reactive. I am not the best wife to her when I'm actively here. And so that reset helps both of us, and doesn't take long to start clearing out pretty quickly. I got my bearings back. Is it bad to lose my bearings? No, I reserve the right to lose my bearings because I'm going to, but I also am able to do that. So some of you were able to kind of see that and navigate, practice that. That's great. Lots of you said that you're doing the 3-breath reset and that you're finding that helpful. And I want to try to kind of hear what is helpful about that. You got to witness that you need it in order to give it to you. And then I also feel like we just need to try to have it be more, we're just doing it more regularly. The 6-word framework also appreciated by many. And I just want to give you that again, because we're going to try to get it into your schedule. Like we want you to memorize this. I'd like actually for you just right now to say them out loud in your head in order. I always like to put like a comma after release, like acknowledge, honor, release, relax, reflect, resolve. Go ahead and say that to yourself for a moment. Here's an example, a brief example of how I'm glad I had this yesterday. Because yesterday I had my calendar was open and I kind of had this thought in my head that I was missing something, but I didn't know on what day and where, but I kind of knew I had miscalendared something. Yesterday my morning was open, so I decided to do some family provisioning at the Costco at 10 o'clock. And at 10:05, I'm in Costco with my mask on, with my list. Realized I didn't have my pen, which to me feels like I don't have my brain if I don't have my pen at a grocery store. So I was already kind of wondering about that. And then I got a text that brought to my mind that I was actually supposed to be on a webinar as the guest at 10 o'clock yesterday. I'm like, oh, well, that's what was missing. And wow, I was like instantly spinning in my head, shame triggered. So bad therapist, bad helper, let people down, let the department down. If you guys were involved in that, my apologies. I actually called the person right away and she's like, thought I was coming in on the Zoom. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm like, to be honest, I'm at Costco. And what she heard was, I'm at the hospital, which I can see how that could happen. So she thought that, said no problem. She adjusted, she did her thing, which she probably also had a moment. And she like navigated that beautifully, was, and then shifted and pivoted. So this is like nimble. She pivoted and had folks just talk about sharing best practices that they've had about coping with all of this that we're going through. As 2/3 of the people stayed on and had a good conversation. I, on the other hand, was at Costco going, oh no, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm somewhere I don't really want to be. I have some thoughts about that. I have some thoughts about not having my pen. I have some thoughts about letting people down. And then also couldn't then not process what I needed to do at Costco. Like I wasn't mindful in that moment. And I was shaming and criticizing myself. I'd like to say the first inner supervisor that came through was a really healthy one, but no, the old one came. Sounds like my dad, when he's mad. So I noticed that. And I went to this, and as soon as I noticed it, because it's right here and handy, I went to the 6 words. I blew it. I dropped a ball. I let people down. I didn't show up. I no-showed for 60 people, right? I don't feel good about that. It's not who I want to be. I'm having some issues with that because I'm shame-triggered right now. Yep, all that's true, and yet I'm going to acknowledge it, nod to it, and then I'm going to the best of my ability, let it emanate. It kind of went all over the Costco, all that energy. People ducked, and at least they were protected, right? And then I relaxed back into myself, took some breath. I could feel myself soothing myself, comforting myself. And then I asked myself, what's most important right now? And my wisdom told me, it's to calmly get what you need and go home. And then fix it. And then that's the resolve. That's what I did. I resolved to do that. And because I did it like that, and then when I got home and was talking to it, happened again. And then I had to let my team know it happened again. I just keep coming back. That's like a smaller, it's not small. I mean, I let some folks down. but it's not earth-shattering, but helpful. But I was also talking to somebody this week who was in crisis in a moment because I have permission to share this story. She's in the NICU with her baby. They've been there a number of weeks. He should be released soon. But for the first time, there was another parent in the space that was being tested for the virus. And her thought was, oh my God, it's in the room with us. And like, it makes sense that she had all that going on. But when we were talking, even the sound of my voice helped her remember what was happening. And she went to the 6-word framework and found her bearings. And she still has to navigate that she's not going to not be with her baby at the NICU and not with her child at home. And she's going to have to navigate that. So this framework helps her do moment to moment, get her bearing, move forward. Upset, get your bearing, move forward. That's the pattern that we're kind of looking for. So my first chat question for you, that's not the chat question. Don't. It's like, that's your feedback. When I asked in the survey, have you been able to use what you've learned since watching the webinar? 4% of you said not at all. So I kind of want this question to be something you speak to if you can. 72% of you said somewhat, which was, I think, cool at session 1. We'll take somewhat. Where I want, and then a quarter of you almost said significantly, which I'm glad to hear. We're wanting you guys to move down towards significantly using it in between. And so the question I have for you that I'm going to open my chat for, yeah. Oh, you said that to everyone. Okay, see, I'm already, what do I do? Okay, here's the question. For those of you that said not at all or somewhat, what was the hesitation or the barrier? Like, what got in the way of that? Okay, it hasn't become a habit yet. Not so the lack of witnessing, just remembering, so we got to get the habit, not in the habit, just forgot, wasn't able to remember, can't be perfect. Well, yeah, because we're going to have those moments. Stop. I kind of want to pause the chat too. Is there a way to do that? Tough situation Sunday, couldn't get past the honoring part. Okay, so you got through part of it, haven't memorized it, got caught up, not a habit. The mud mine was too thick for sure. TV crap going on. So like not having a quiet space to figure it out. People having a hard time with releasing. Still new. I saw it after the fact of it. Yeah, after the fact learning, so important. I used to say this entire, like, you can't know what you know before you know it. And there's going to be times where something happens and you haven't seen it yet. So let me just totally normalize that because this is reactive patterning. I mean, I've been learning this 25 years, and there's still times like this weekend where I went and didn't notice that I did. Understanding that you'll have these moments, absolutely. You've been lucky not to be in crisis. Well, that's cool. I still think even if you're not in crisis, there's probably still ways that witnessing this and navigating it could be helpful to you. Just in terms of taking a breath, just in terms of resetting for clarity, for creativity, it can still be helpful. Yeah, absolutely. So one of my helpers, her name was her name is still Mavis. I hope that she's still on the planet and everything. Very helpful to me in many ways. She would say, yeah, if you wake up and you're in the middle of the swamp, you got swamp-like conditions to deal with. It's so much easier if you're walking down a path and you hear a squish and you look down and you see that it's wet and you look up and you see that you're heading into a swamp. Well, that's easier. So the more we do this, the more it should help us see it, our reaction, see it happening or see it in advance of happening. Now I can see sometimes where a thought will come through and I'm like, wow, I could really take that and go places with it. Or not, right? Or not. Good. Sounds like people are finding this open chat time helpful. Yeah, trying to name your emotions to your kids. Helpful because you want your kids to see that you're having this emotion this second, but a couple moments later, you're going to have a different one. So also make sure you're noticing out loud that you had a reaction and now you're not, right? Like my kids fear grief less because when I was grieving my mom, they would see me raw and then they would see me laugh and then I would make the connection. You see how sometimes I'm feeling this and sometimes I'm feeling that? And so it's okay to have this and let yourself feel that because you're going to have this too. Good. Okay. All right. I'm going to close the chat on this one now. We'll come back and chat with you later. I'd like to chat with you all the time. Remember, if you're wanting to ask a question specifically that you want me to address, put it in the Q&A and Megan will shoot it over here for me. So,
Lisa, can you remind them, as they mention about they remembered it after the fact, about giving themselves grace and taking time to kind of work through the words so that they can practice thinking about it like they're a kindergartner or a toddler having to learn a new skill?
Yeah, I think I'll just let you say that, right?
Okay.
It is so wise, and she's been hanging out with me and these ideas for a long time. And I really appreciate it. I asked her to interject with that. Yes. So just like when we go through something and we might want to have a debriefing session about it afterwards, say like, well, what went well with that? What didn't? If you just lose your ever-loving mind and you don't like who you are, afterwards saying, what happened for me? What was that about? Let me get my bearings. And then if you see that you were acting out of alignment, that gives you a chance to circle back around with the person right away and just say, you know, that I just wasn't my best self. Like the other day, in a moment, my wife and I were talking about on the phone. We were talking about something related to insurance or some business thing, and I just was overwhelmed in the moment, pressured. I was probably trying to handle this conversation in Mudmine, didn't realize it, and then just was like you know, just too staccato in my interaction. And then we got off the phone, and then I did something else, and then I think I went to the bathroom. I didn't even notice I had to do that. And then like when I got quiet, I like could tell that I had been bringing energy that wasn't my intention. And so the very next time we communicated, I was able to kind of say that, take accountability for that. How do you take accountability if you don't even see it? Right? Right. So thanks, Megan.
No problem. We have one question before we move on that I do think is important, as I also think it'll help you transition into the next piece. And that is, as you're speaking through things today, can you provide any advice for those that are trying to teach online and make this whole new concept work?
I'm also trying to teach online and make this whole new concept work. So, you know, if I can think of that as I go, I will, for sure. And we're kind of all learning that together too. So like for example, why can't I get my slide to move right now? There. Okay, just coming back to right now, this moment, are you here right now? Or are you distracted with whatever's going on in your remote working office or wherever you happen to be? So just in this moment, wanting you to take a second to tend to your external learning environment. Right before we went on, I realized I hadn't shut this door yet, so I would be more aware of my daughter moving about the house. So I had to kind of just really tend to it. So just take a second to do that, including asking other people for what you need. This learning is important for you and you deserve to have it. Okay, so I hope that you're taking some steps there. And then also wanting you to start to tend to your internal learning environment. So are you fully present, or are you here but thinking about something else right now? Because I'm wanting this to get in. And so if your brain is like that moving fan, we want to slow the fan down so that something can get in. Hopefully you can see that. Slowing the fan down, not like this, right? Multitasking makes your fan speed go up. Now you can do more than one thing at one time in a quiet mind, So I don't think I would say that you should never be doing two things at once, because I could be stirring something on the stove and talking to a kid, but my mind might be quiet, and that might be fine. But sometimes when we're thinking about the next thing, like that's, you're not going to get anything out of this. If you're in mind right now, you might as well go ahead and close out. I mean, you have a choice. Either come home to yourself or give it up and watch the recording later. Watch I can't see the numbers plummet. I hope not. Because I want to be with you in this moment. And I want us to be together in this learning. So you have to give yourself permission. Let yourself be here right now for this incoming. Okay. People really said they appreciated the reminder to just take a breath. So if you could just do a 3-breath reset right now, like we talked about, first one, just your breath. Second one, your tension, noticing it, how your body, how you're sitting, and then just dropping into a more relaxed place. Third one today on that third breath, we'll try a basic reset skill of what 5 things. So as you exhale, look around the room and what 5 things do you see? Name 5 colors you can see. What 5 things can you hear? And then maybe just in one more breath and just noticing that candle flame for a moment. Bringing your attention to the candle flame while allowing yourself to settle. Settle and open. You're moving from processing mode to a receiving mode. I'm smiling because I'm picturing moments where like I'm in interruptive mode when I'm listening to someone, particularly my wife, and then I get invited to either her or me to try to notice and fall back into receiving. I'm just taking it in. And we do our best learning when we're in receiving mode and just taking stuff in. Last week's home reflection was really designed to help you start waking up the witness. It's the noticer. We're trying to turn on the part of you that can notice what's happening for you. If you don't notice, you can't take accountability. If you don't notice, you can't reset. So it really, like people used to say, like, well, how do you do this? Like noticing, being willing to become a noticer is so critical. So last week I asked you to start doing some emotional wellness check-ins because it's noticing practice. Like right now, if you could notice what's going on with your physical state. Are you tired? Are you relaxed? Are you tense? Are you hungry? Are you now everyone's going to leave and get food. Did you sleep well? Like if you didn't sleep well and you're a little tired, please stay with us and just recognize that you're participating in a tired state. Let's just welcome that and know that. With your mood, right? Again, with your mood, can you notice your mood? The most important part is noticing. It's that you don't get points for being in an awesome mood all the time. You get points for noticing, and points for noticing and points for redirecting. State of mind, same thing. You don't get points for being all I think one of the dangers of meditation, yoga, like just of the cultural effort to have people quiet down, is this idea that if you do yoga, you should be able to be in an Om state of mind all the time. And that's never been part of the plan. When you're doing yoga and you're bringing all your attention to the present moment, the mud mind settles and you can see with clarity, right? And you can do that a lot when you're not on the yoga mat. But it's not the yoga, it's the noticing and allowing yourself to settle. So please don't judge yourself if you notice that you're in a really sped up mind, because we go through all day long. We go, in and out of mud mine to clear mine, unattached, open, receiving, processing, busy, sped up. Just we want the noticer to notice. Two things we're going to show you. One is improving your noticer's ability to notice, and the other is understanding the value of resetting. Because if I'm talking about the value of resetting, but you don't own that that's a helpful thing for you, this will also not be relevant. You have to notice that you need it, and you have to know that you want it. And if you put those two things together, this conversation can really be helpful to you. We're going to talk a little bit more about the personal rule book next week, but you're just starting to notice strong reactions. I don't want you to run around like trying to figure out what all your rules are about everything, because that would just be a whole other job. But when you're having a strong reaction and you start to kind of witness, that's when you want to ask yourself, what rule is making me so uptight? What belief am I holding on to? Like, what truth? We hold these truths to be self-evident. Yeah, they're self-evident, but not necessarily evident to the person standing next to you who has a different rule book, right? Like my rules, like we're going to talk about separate realities a little bit today. My rules and your rules, we are the author of our rule book, right? Some people say they live by the good book, and I'm like, what book is that? Because a lot of us have this other book of like the ideas and teachings that we get from all these different places. So this is like, I live by the book of Lisa, right? And I have like chapter 32, My Relationship with Food by Lisa Laughman. Like, and if I can see how dominant culture impacted that rule book writing, and how people told me things and I just, okay, note to self, believe that, right? Or I just made them up completely on my own. If I have a rule book and I don't know I have a rule book, and these rules get like I remember once a long time ago, a woman telling me that there was a woman in her office that got really upset if the staple wasn't in the exact right place. When somebody gave this woman, back when we had staples, handed them a document, they couldn't even get into the document if the staple wasn't in the right place in the right way, because they had to have a bunch of thoughts about that first because of a staple rule, right? And so some of the rules that we get, dominant culture just sort of gives us, and we're little and we just write them down without questioning. That's why that big circle is about starting to have critical awareness about what we were taught, because a lot of what we were taught does not equate with emotional wellness. What we were taught does not equate with our ability to navigate across differences with intersectionality, with beauty, with humanity. A lot of our rules make our life harder, and I'm going to ask you to start noticing and then fact checking, like, where does this rule even come from? And how did it even get there? And do I still want to subscribe to that, right? Like when I start feeling really stressed about stuff, sometimes, like I remember I had 3 kids and a dog, single mom, had a house on the market for 2.5 years. I had 81 showings on that house over the course of that 2.5 years. And there would be times where I'd be really hard on myself because it didn't look like my mom would have wanted it to look if someone was going to come into my house. Like show ready, I realized show ready in my head was like my mom's show ready. And I don't know about you, but my mom subscribed to Good Housekeeping, right? And I, at that point in my life, and like in general, that's not the magazine. I want to subscribe to Good Enough Housekeeping, because the condition of the house isn't as important to me as the relationships I have with the people in the house. And so that was a rule upgrade for me. And there was less stress with the showings after I realized that. I still tried to make it look really nice and do the best I could, but it wasn't with so much pressure, right? So if I don't notice that I'm having a rule activated, I'm at the mercy of the rule, which might have been something I picked up when I was 5 that isn't even helpful, right? That I can't have the value-guided life I want to have if I'm still going to participate with that. So we're just noticing the rules right now, just noticing. Here's a poll for you. That's not the poll question. No, that is the poll question. Do you feel like when I say, wake up the witness, do you have a sense of what I mean about that? How well? Like, is that, yes, I get that, somewhat, say some more, or I'm not getting that at all? going to give you a moment to answer that in the poll function. And then Megan, as soon as you have that data, let me know. If you're done with your poll and still waiting, go ahead and just do some more breathing. I think I'll tell myself to do that too. So,
all right, I'm going to give it about 9 more seconds, and then I'm going to close the poll. We're almost there.
I like the randomness of 9 seconds, Megan.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the results for everyone, and I'm going to read them to you. So we're kind of approximately even between yes at 48%, 47% at somewhat, say more, and a 4% at not at all.
Okay, that's cool.
So
again, with the 4%, I wonder if it's the same 4%. All right, that's cool. That's good to know. Okay, so I will say some more. Go ahead and ask the other question. I'll ask the other question. It's my job to ask the question. I also just wondering, did you try an emotional wellness check-in this past week? Just yes or no? We'll say that just checking the chat and seeing some of your names does make me feel like you're more in the room with me, so I like that. Some familiar names I'm seeing.
okay, I'm going to give it again about 3 more seconds because it looks like we're getting there. And I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. And I'm going to share the results. And we're at about a 69% yes and a 31% no.
Cool. And so if you're in the 31% no category, no judgment, just an invitation to all of you. Like I'm going to ask the question again next week, and I really want you just to try it because it's not like a big laborsome thing I want you to do. I just want you to periodically take a minute and just check in. One of the folks that was in the Great Lakes Leadership Academy that I teach in, when she was explaining it to her husband, she said, it's kind of like the systems check in your car. Like you just push the button and it says oil life 70%, kind of goes through. It doesn't take long, but boy, is it helpful to have that data because then you know when you need to get your oil changed. So it's kind of like that. Like what's going on with me? So physical, mood, like, oh, I should quiet my mind. Cool. Or rule, right? And so we'll check back in. So thanks for those who tried. And it just really is about the practice. So it's excellent. Okay. This chat question, if you're in the percentage that did try, that's more 70%, just some chat, I'm opening the chat, just some chat about how did it change your experience? Because help the folks who maybe are less aware of what's the benefit of witnessing is what I'm trying to get at. Made you more humble and aware. Cool. The benefit wasn't much because your kids and your family are stubborn. So ultimately, your witnessing is entirely about you. It's about, so it would be like trying to deal with family members that are stubborn without my bearings or with my bearings. So it's not about the family people. Took time for me, came back to myself, noticed, wow, okay, I'm going to take time to read all of these. They just go so fast. Help the emotion pass through and not get stuck in it. Good. Help to take a breath, collect your emotions. I like that, collecting my emotions. Like, what the heck am I even feeling? Let me just collect myself about my emotions. Instead of being in them, let me sort of see what they are. Noticing you were angry. Oh, that's cool. No, Wendy, I didn't notice that. 99%. Cool. Notice you were stressed and went for a walk, came back to my center. See, we want to just come back before moving forward. Always calmed me down and allowed me to regroup. Gave me a minute to acknowledge where I was at and what I was feeling and the reason behind it. Yeah, kind of taking stock in all of this. This is some big stuff we're dealing with. I checked in with myself and knew I was not in a good mindset, was able to tell my spouse I was not in a good mindset. So he was able to navigate with that information. Yeah, you get data, they get data. And here's the thing, they also get that you care that you're centered or not centered. Helped you recenter. You guys are getting the centering quality about it. I love that. Did something physical instead of worrying. Yeah, if you don't know that you're shopping in the, oh my God, this is horrible thought store, you don't know what else to do. Okay. I was able to tell I was just not feeling well one day and it was affecting my mood. Yes. Some days you feel like a nut. Some days you don't. Sometimes you're hot. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're going to not be having a trauma response and sometimes you are. Just noticing with the neutral eye of a camera. Noticing without judgment. Notice you were realizing everyone else was wrong about something and was able to move from that to what I wasn't getting about it. I'm sure they appreciated that, right? Now we get to see, reconnect, and be more helpful in whatever setting that was in. You needed an adjustment on your meds. Yeah, that's gonna be important to notice, right? Sometimes people notice that they used to need different medications and now they're needing different things. Like it needs to be adjusted. Okay, so ingrained in the spiral that in the moment couldn't do it. So Marcia, I really want you to be trying on the witnessing when you're not having a hard time. The more we try when we're not having a hard time, the more it's going to be there for us when we do. It's made you happier and healthier. Excellent. I love that. Okay, I'm going to close the chat so we can get to the next part. That's good. I just want other people who maybe haven't practiced and leaned into the witnessing to get that once you start getting the hang of that, you're going to be really glad you have the capacity to, like everyone has the capacity to witness. I remember I was doing a training once for a group and this guy said, you know, you're talking as if you think everyone has the capacity for self-awareness. And I was like, yeah, like the vast majority of us. I mean, some folks might have a cognitive issue that might help that be a barrier, but the vast majority of us can notice if we have enough of awareness to know that that's a helpful thing. Good. Keep noticing, people. That's great. I'm very proud of the range of noticing going on here. So, okay. What did you notice? Also notice what happened when you noticed what you noticed. This little walk gently picture, I want to just point that out. You want to notice when you're not walking gently. You want to notice when the song you're singing is not row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, but you're having a moment when you're singing row, row, row your boat, straddle straight and scream, right? Like you want to notice the gentle. Notice the easy. I got a peaceful, easy feeling, right? Or I don't. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I want to point out that this walk gently image is created by a woman named Terry St. Cloud. This is called a St. Cloudy. And you can find that at bonsaiart.com, one of my very favorite websites to be about emotional expression through art. So please check that out and support that work if you're able. Some things I want you to notice this week, like that camera. Somebody wanted more pictures. There's your camera. Neutral eye of camera, right? Are you in mud mine right now? Are you actively resisting something? These are things we want you to notice. Are you resenting something? I sometimes find myself resenting something that I made up or that I agreed to. And when I quiet down, I still want to do, but in this moment, I'm resenting that I have to prepare for a webinar for 500 people when I might rather be watching Grey's Anatomy. It's like, that's not really even what I want. That's not even how I feel. I'm just in a moment where that's happening. So just noticing, a friend of mine was like, I noticed that I was resenting my neighbors for having to take out their trash when I offered that to the elderly couple in the winter. And so maybe that was more about my mood than actually what it looked like it was about. So noticing all of that. Are you having moments where you're just letting yourself, where you're both awake and not processing? I would like you just to catch yourself. A lot of people are like, "Ooh, I don't know if I ever do that." Well, then let's begin to like incorporate that. Also, love this conversation I had with this couple this week that they said to me, if you had asked us a month ago, hey, you guys are going to be locked in, just the two of you with your kids for an extended period of time, how's that going to go? They would have said, not well. They were laughing with each other. They're like, ooh, that wouldn't have been pretty. This much witnessing and this family, first the couple and now the kids, they're just grounded in having this be precious, sweet time that they will remember fondly later, right? So they've got their value, they got the compass set that they can have that energy later. And so they're like about to go off about something and they're like, does this fit that energy? No. What's my energy like? And what energy am I bringing to other people right now? Just noticing. And then noticing and gently self-correcting. Noticing and taking loving accountability. Noticing and circling back around and just acknowledging it and apologizing for it. Okay. Reminding you of that framework. Again, these are the different theories and perspectives that are about the model. They are the theoretical framework and also your learning targets over time. Today, we're going to focus on these two. One, because I want to share with you the initial piece of like your basic operating system that I think would be helpful. And then the big red one is because I refuse to do that without also honoring the context that people are living in and practicing critical awareness of what dominant culture is putting out towards us that we're trying to have to contend with. So you'll see how I try to incorporate that. And if anybody wants me to know more about one of those things, feel free to send that into the chat so I can look at that later, because I'm a constant learner in that regard. So the focus today is to learn the basic operating instructions for your guidance system, right? And so the big piece today that I'm going to try to get to in the next half hour or so is the inside-out nature of our moment-to-moment experience. I did not know this. I thought I was living at the mercy of my circumstances. I thought my circumstances and other people, events, things, they were bringing my experience to me. It looked like life was coming at me. I remember working with a young person who was like, life sucks. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, life sucks. My life sucks. Had it on a t-shirt. My life sucks. Life sucks. I'm like, say more. This is happening, and this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and it all sucks. And I'm like, yes, well, that is all not cool. Actually, what I just said was, oh, I get it. Okay, thanks. That helps me understand your perspective. And they asked more questions. I'm like, well, so I used to think that life was my circumstances, and often they sucked. And this person and I had some similarities that would make us both get that some of what we were dealing with was not okay. But now I see that that's not life. Like life is not, like my life circumstances aren't my life. Hear this. Life is what flows through me that allows me to respond to my circumstances. My circumstances are still part of what I'm experiencing, and I have creative capacity and adaptive function and capacity to like navigate that. And so what I would say is we have external circumstances to contend with. Some of us are having bigger circumstances to contend with right now than we normally have. Some of us are trying to deal with all of the stuff that's happening now with a whole bunch of external circumstances that were pre-existing and historical and cultural on top of us. And so I don't want to minimize what we're up against, any one of us or all of us, the collective. But I also, oh no, not but. When you say but, you erase everything you just said, and I want to do that. And, see, I said, and we are having a personal experience of our external circumstances. Like right now, my experience is one way about doing this webinar. Did the webinar create my experience? No. Last night I was having a different, and 10 minutes before I was on, I was having a different experience of the webinar. I've had lots of different webinars happen, experience variable, right? So I would say additionally to that, we're having a personal experience of our external circumstances. We are actually creating our personal reality of our external circumstances right now. We don't often control the circumstances, and that's true. And we are in this moment. I'm going to try to show you today a little bit, back up a little bit, how out of nothing I create my experience of this moment. How does that work? Like until I got into these classes 25 years ago, I hadn't really ever, I was 29, I hadn't really ever considered how I come up with my experience. Nobody had ever talked to me about that. And so as you start to look at these principles, these three principles, that kind of the basics of it is that all humans that are functioning kind of as originally designed have the capacity to create an experience of reality, a personal experience of reality, moment to moment. And that we're all doing that. And we all have the same gifts that allow us to do that. And then the content of that changes because of our experiences. So let me try to explain that a little bit more. Our personal reality of our circumstances is variable and changes moment to moment. And that's why we have these things called separate realities. And so my reality or experience can be radically different than the next person. And it will be because of we've had different experiences, we have different beliefs, we have different personality types, different temperament types. And so what one person, if we all experience the same thing, what one person creates about it and what the next person creates about it is very likely to be different. Additionally, so we can have a separate reality with a person standing next to us, which we're seeing a lot of, where like of the group of people that are still working in culinary services and still feeding students who are still here, the circumstances, they have to go to work, and it isn't entirely safe, and they are at greater risk of getting sick than I am because of that. And inside of that, this person might be having one experience I've been hearing is like very focused on the purpose and the meaning of providing food to students in need. And so because they have that thought, they're having a certain experience. Another person that's feeling like they're not valued as much as people who get to be home, they're not valued by the institution as much as people. If they're having that, they're going to have a different experience. Not judging either of those experiences, just noticing that they're going to be different, even though some of the circumstances might be similar. Some are also very different. And so that reality could be different because somebody could be really concerned about that because they have a child at home with asthma, and that changes the circumstances can change why a person would be having the thoughts that they're having. Hoping I'm going to clear that up in a minute. You can also, though, have a separate reality with yourself. Like in one moment you can have this thought and be having this reality, and then something can happen and somebody can make a suggestion, or you can just have a new thought, and all of a sudden you just saw it this way, but now you're seeing it this way. And so I can, like, not even 5 minutes ago, 5 seconds ago, like I was having one reality of my situation last weekend, and when my wife put her hand on my back and said, "Can you remember what you teach?" In that moment, I let go of the one I was creating, and then I had a whole different experience, kind of like that. And what's helpful about that is knowing that the way I'm framing it right now isn't the way I'm always going to be framing it. And so really embracing the variability of it, so that if I can see that I'm having an experience that's not helpful, I'm supported by the idea and the knowledge and the learning and the knowing that it's not going to be it's not the only, and it's not the forever. It's not the only experience. When I go through grief and I'm like totally constricted with grief, I'm very sad at the loss of singer-songwriter John Prine. And in one moment I would have one reaction to it, and in another moment I'm not going to have that reaction all the time. It's going to be variable. Here's the old equation that people use related to making up their experience, that you have your external experience, that the E is just representing some external experience. So the old equation is that the circumstance creates the stress. In that model, whenever that circumstance shows up, like those stubborn family members, you have to feel stress. And then if you have a lot of those different things going on, then you're going to have what I call clinically really, really big stress, right? This is the equation most people, and some people in the field, go by, because we call them stressors, things that cause stress. We think they cause the stress. If you think those things cause your stress, then you're going to have stress more often. If I think that the test causes me stress, every time I take a test, I'm going to have test anxiety. If I start to shift that and say tests happen, anxiety optional, then I might navigate that differently. Similarly, if I have a lot going on, like I have to go to the grocery store, maybe Costco, I'm having Zoom challenges, there's lack of clear information and I don't know what's expected of me, and meanwhile on the TV there's this increasing death toll. If I think all those things create my stress, then I'm going to be freaked out this entire time, because I'm pretty sure that on any given day I'm going to have some of those external things happening that I just have to do, that are just part of it. This is the equation we're trying. Oh, wait, look here. Doesn't this look familiar? Right? So the circumstances are still happening, right? In fact, I want to honor those by saying they might even be pulsating. They're big and involved. And it's those circumstances plus this internal part that actually leads into what our experience is in the moment. This equation changes everything. It really does. So the old equation is those circumstances create my reality at me. What I'm trying to help you see is that my connection, back to that garden hose analogy, my connection, I am connected to life energy, the energy that flows through the spigot, through the hose. I'm connected to that creative flow. I'm connected to new ideas. I'm connected, like what we call that, the people I learned from call that mind. And I just realized, Megan, I forgot to put on this slide. I will put a link in to talk about these three principles and give you a link to where you can learn more about them. Those folks call that energy mind. I've never really called it mind. I feel like that's kind of borrowed from Eastern tradition, maybe without permission. I actually like to call it source energy or life energy or creative flow. That something's beating my heart. Something's energetically helping me respirate. Something's also helping me have a psychological and emotional experience as well. I'm connected to that gratefully and hopefully for a long, 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 long time. At some point, this body won't have that energy flowing through it, and then I won't be able to create an experience of reality anymore. Again, I hope that's a long time from now. Got lots of things to do and people to love in the meantime. But the idea of knowing that you're connected to that is crucial to being able to navigate from the inside out. Because that, we're going to talk about that next time. We're going to talk about, what does that energy really feel like? You could send it to the chat. I'm not going to see right now, but I can look at it later. But what do you call that energy? And so lots of people call it different things. A doctor might call it the biological life force. Artists call it the creative flow. Sports folks call it flow or the zone. Business folks, the zone, being in the zone, having that energy. Some people call it insight, intuition. Some people might have a spiritual tradition. They might call it a power greater than myself. They might have a religious frame for that, and so there's language that they might use to describe that. if you're a Star Wars fan, you might refer to it as the Force, right? Like, may the Force be with you in that moment. Like, I'm gonna trust my intuition, my wisdom, my common sense. So just wanting you to start to get the idea that you are connected to that nothing that's happened to you, no experience you've had, no historical or cultural trauma or discrimination that you've experienced, interrupts your capacity to have it and to be connected. It is your well-being. It's your innate mental health and well-being. And we want to start to notice it as well. That is one thing we are really not good at noticing, is our health and well-being. And when I was first being taught these principles, I didn't believe I had it, right? I believed everybody else in the room had it, but I just thought I was not in line that day when they were handing that out, and I missed it. And I have come to believe, as a social worker, I would also see that circumstances could break people and then maybe they wouldn't have it. Now I would say that we all still have it. We may be caught up in story and experience that tells us that we're not connected to it. Like, I know a lot of survivors of a lot of different things might have a thought that they no longer are worthy of that. But the truth of the matter is we all still have it. And if we start to look for it, we can find it. That's what happened to me. When somebody asked me to start noticing it, I noticed a moment when I was coming from it, and I'm like, oh, wow, what's that? Wow, I'm having a calm moment, or I'm having a new idea, or I'm having some grace, or, and then I started to look for it, and then it started to get brighter and brighter and brighter, and I started to access it more and more and more. Here's what it looks like. Again, you got those external circumstances out. I'm really wanting to say that it's not without the historical and dominant cultural narrative. It's always back up there and impacting us. And so I don't want to minimize any of it. And I still want to see our individual quality of that. So pick any one of these, and some people are having all of these go on right now. The stay-at-home orders are rules and policies that now we have to contend with, and it might change how we do our self-isolating or our physical distancing. Or maybe we need to have a new creative idea about how to navigate that. That is something we're dealing with. What's my wisdom saying? How's best to navigate it? So it's out there and a thing, and we're navigating. And I'm bringing this one back up because I just want to have that be the one that kind of stays in your mind, that the experience that I would have permission to share is a woman that I know that has cerebral palsy, is a wheelchair user, has been feeling some anxiety, right? And particularly because she's hearing that hospitals are going to make decisions that will disadvantage and kill folks with disabilities because they might save ventilators for people who don't have disabilities. So that's the question she takes to the therapist, and the therapist doesn't get that there's health disparities. Actually, the frustrating thing was that the therapist actually, so this is a person that has some social justice skills, and sort of confronted the therapist. The therapist said, I quoted, I put it on my wall so I wouldn't forget, the therapist says, virus doesn't discriminate, but our systems do. Yeah, maybe the virus is just, the virus gets that we're all humans, right? But our systems do discriminate. So if I'm talking to somebody that's dealing with those kinds of things, of course they're going to have different experiences and thoughts than I might. They have got different things to navigate. So differently daunting circumstances for sure. And whatever your circumstances are, I want you to have this inside out quality to navigate, to advocate, to get support. So hoping this is translating well. All right, so we all have connection to this energy, and crisis and dominant culture up there, or not, disappeared again. Here's the three things we get. These three things are what help me have an experience. They allow me to create my experience in this moment right now. I'm connected to that flow. I just had a thought about I'm out of time, so I decided to take a breath. Connected to that flow. The light bulb is designed to sort of show you your consciousness is what they call it. I call it awareness, your sensory awareness. I have the capacity to illuminate my thoughts. That's the big neutral gift. I'm connected to life energy that allows me to have a life in the first place. And it's powering my psychological experience, and I can illuminate any thought that I hold. And the third thing, so I've got mind, consciousness, and then thought. Or in my language, I'm connected to the life energy, I have sensory awareness and thought, right? And those things are constantly in flow. Some of those thoughts are brand new thoughts represented by these little blue X's. And some of those thoughts are thoughts I've had before, which are represented here more in the bucket. And from any given moment, what happens is one thought takes precedence and jumps into the thought hopper, if you will, and it starts to be illuminated by my sensory. That one thought pops out immediately when that thought, represented by the T, and my consciousness connect, I'm going to start to have that experience of that thought, and I'm going to have it physiologically. And it's like if I have a thought about fingernails on a chalkboard, right? If I had time to do a poll, I'd say, how many of you just shivered, right? I'm guessing a fair percentage of you did. Or if I think about sucking on a lemon, I just did it. I even said it. I had to like swallow because all of a sudden I had like the physiological experience of a lemon, right? If I think I'm going to be hit by a car, if I have the thought I'm going to be hit by a car, it doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. Physiologically, I'm going to have the sensory experience of fear. That works 100% of the time. Like we have a thought and it gets brought to life into our feeling, into our emotional experience. It also causes us to have, there's that thought, and then now that particular thought, that blue thought is now being illuminated into that feeling. And then I'm going to have more thoughts about that, which is going to make that feeling get bigger. And then ultimately I'm going to act out of that. I'm going to have a physiological experience in the moment, and then I'm going to act out of that with some behavior. And then that behavior is going to lead to some kind of outcome. We call this the thought cycle. The thought cycle is happening all the time, and it varies because if instead of that blue thought, I went with a green thought, then I would have the green feeling and the green behavior. And the green behavior is often either an expression of the energy or an attempt to shut it down. But it comes out of that experience that we're having. So if you don't understand how this works, you're just having a big feeling. And in the moment that you're having the big feeling, what do? You don't look in and say, what's happening for me? What am I holding on to? How am I creating this? You look out and you say, that thing is causing my emotion. And if you only have that frame, then you're at the mercy of that circumstance. And if we think something has an external cause and we can't change it, then we're not going to know what to do about that energy. And so we're going to start looking for an external cure, which I always draw a little donut because that's like, donuts and other cake-like products for much of my life has been the first go-to thing that I look to like medicate the feeling. So I'm in that, and that donut's magical. Have a bad feeling, get a donut. I often joke that Little Debbie was my first girlfriend, right? Like we go way back to like 9, 10 years old. We hanging out, middle school, dating kind of thing, right? And if I think I need that cake-like product in order to release the feelings, I'm at risk of having some addiction. I'm concerned about that right now because people not knowing that there's some other way to reset are at risk of drinking too much right now, of eating stuff that's not like helpful, and having ongoing health concerns because of that. So if you look at this bigger picture, this is happening. Now, if you'll notice where I write, where I've written reactive self up here, like if you have a thought and that gets activated and now you're up here, which is a lot like, moving. And out of that, you only get this quality. You only get the red stuff, like, right? And maybe it's moving around really rapidly like that. You don't have the ability to notice that if you don't have an observing self. On this slide, it says observing self. I would have changed it to witness self for clarity, but I couldn't change this slide without the tools I needed to do that. So we'll call it your witness. From down here, if you're up here and you don't see this, then it's hard for you to even know, like Marsha, when you were saying the spin was so big, like you were up here in that moment. And a lot of times what we do that's not helpful when we're up here is we try to control the thought. We try to make ourselves not have the thought. We yell at ourselves for having the thought. Any more to do with the thought is just going to make that continue to go. What we want to do is direct our attention, I often draw this instead of a light bulb, like in a movie projector. I'm going to save you 10 years of my own learning because I thought the consciousness was like the light bulb in a movie projector. The energy was me being plugged into a power source. I'm the movie projector. I can only work if I'm plugged in. I can only work if I have that light bulb shining out, neutral, doesn't move, only illuminates what's in front of it. And so in that case, the thought I'm having creates the movie on the screen. If we think that the consciousness and the awareness is neutral and unmoving, then the only way to change the movie is to change the film, which is why we struggle so much with our thinking, which is going to be the focus of next time. We have struggled so much with our thinking. And the more we struggle with our thinking, the more we're still making that movie up. So if you were to see this light bulb here as more of like, if I could draw a little flashlight, you have the flashlight of attention. And when you're caught in that reactive thought pattern, you're holding your flashlight on that. Any effort to try to change that thought is you still shining your light of attention on that thought. When you notice that you're gripped by the thought or you're fighting the thought or you're wrestling the thought, we don't want you to do any more with the thought. We want you to take your flashlight of attention and put it on your breath. Put it on the squirrel. Put it on the food you're eating and how good it tastes. And you can put it on the gratitude for the people and the hands that touched all of that to kind of get it to you, even in these times. Then you're going to have a different experience. So if your observing self isn't noticing that your reactive self is making up this one story, you don't know to disconnect it. And we'll talk more about this in the next couple weeks too. Right now, we just want you to notice when you're having that reactive thought. And you know what, that thought you're having, it might be true. Sometimes it's like it's true, but it's still not helpful for me to be like, it's true. I might get this virus. Well, okay, that's true. And illuminating that thought like doesn't actually help me in a way that's bringing panic, doesn't help me actually do the things that might help me not, right? So we're wanting to have this reset. So how we're experiencing those circumstances and the dominant cultural experience up top depends a lot by what the content of our thought is. Sometimes we have brand new thoughts. Sometimes we have what I call already thought thoughts, which is, I've called this the already thought bucket. And so it's important to sort of notice when we're talking about rules in our rule book, we could also draw this little square as the rule book. They're sort of equivalent. So how do we get the thoughts that we get? We have a lot of sources that come in there. Some of them we just make up completely on our own, and a lot of times we make up stuff incorrectly. And we also get stuff given to us that may or may not be true or accurate. Dominant culture tells us what is true and normal and just and beautiful, and it's set up to give us those messages because it supports the power structure of the people who have power. It's not actually what's true and beautiful, or at least not what I'm going to claim is that, right? Because dominant culture, when I was growing up, the loudest drumbeat about who I am is that I'm a pervert, right? And so that got in my bucket, and that is why I was suicidal when I was a teenager. I no longer claim that. I no longer identify with that. That's not my truth. It's not who I am. And I also had a rule that got in there that I'm only okay if people like me, right? And I also don't have that rule anymore. So, I used to think that that my worth, my self-worth, was based on people liking me. So that rule, that already thought, whenever somebody did judge me, I wasn't okay. Now my rule, upgrade, is that my worth doesn't come from you to me. It comes up and through me because I'm connected to a power greater than myself. I'm connected to love, to community, to compassion, and that's what drives me and forward in my value-guided life, my own unique and individual value-guided life. So I wanted to show you this picture because it links to the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations around implicit bias. So given this image, I hope you can see that there's no way any one of us could possibly be a person who does not have bias, right? Because we get our version of what those are, but they may not be accurate across differences. And so what we have in ours that we believe to be true, or haven't seen that there's not an example, like I love that. I love when college roommates come together and they're like, I didn't know you could do that way, right? That's a bucket upgrade. So that's why we all have implicit bias. And if you don't have a thought and a rule that says good people don't have biases, when somebody tells you that you have a bias, no matter how they tell you, in what form, they might be in an upset, if they give you that, it's really just something to sort of wonder about, like, what are they saying and what do I believe and where did I get that? And it's like, we're much more willing, I believe, I just said this morning in a meeting I was at about the intersection between diversity, equity, and inclusion work and this work, is if people didn't get shame triggered by the idea that someone pointed out that something they believe doesn't fit for all people, then we would be able to have much better conversations about all of that. And I'm offering today because we are impacted by what's in our already thought bucket. A big awareness of that this week, because I'm going to ask you this question. When you think of the coronavirus, what are your first thoughts? In fact, just chat those for just a brief second. I know I'm totally getting close to running out of time, but just chat. I'm not even going to, well, I guess I will look for a minute. Just chat maybe what some of your first thoughts are. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Just anybody's first thoughts, just all your first thoughts. Go for it. Woo! Okay. I'm just scanning, life threat, debt, terror, terrifying, sad, anxiety, scared, mad, fear, uncontrolled, can't control it, bait and switch, uninfo, death, ugh, afraid, fascinating. I got a fascinating. Fascinating was the first one I saw. Loved ones dying. The flu kills more people. That's a different thought. Impact of historic and curricle health. And thank you. And I appreciate that. Worried about medical professionals. Okay. So, okay. Keep doing. I'm going to shut it off so I can think. Maybe I'm going to shut it off. Okay. All right. All of that's true for me. In fact, I've intentionally spent time reading stories about people dying and the grief and loss part because as a grief counselor, I want to be ready. If you bring me your story to me, I don't want to be shocked or upset. I don't want to have my concerns in the mix. So I've been making myself read that. And it wasn't until I got a Facebook post. I'm going to pull this up. I got a Facebook post from a guy I mentioned last week. His name is Dickon Bettinger. And he is the first and probably most significant teacher about the three principles, about how this works. He's the one that helped me see it. And I'm really grateful to him for helping me. He's a person I love very much. I once embarrassed him because I said that he made me less a lesbian because I loved him so much. It was just an awkward moment. Probably shouldn't have said that. I'm looking for the picture I'm looking for here. Just a second. Because the other day, here we go. The other day, this man, why is this not working? This is Dickon. This is Dickon's beautiful face. Looking at it this morning, with the text exchanges that I've had with him in the last couple of days, makes my heart get really big. If I had gotten a different text, if this Facebook was different, like if this said we lost Dickon, I don't know, I would have had a really hard time. I can barely even think about it. I care about this person so much, right? What this post does say is, I want to extend all my love and gratitude to all my Facebook friends who sent me love and healing during my 17-day ordeal with the coronavirus. Yesterday, I woke up feeling normal for the first time. No fever, no chronic headaches, no total body aches, no debilitating fatigue. It felt like such a blessing. I got dressed this morning and walked down to the beach. My senses were alive to the smells and all the bird songs and all the beauty of our trees and our ocean. I felt so alive and overflowing with gratitude. I'm so grateful that he's okay. And what I realized, I talked with him yesterday. He gave me permission to use this. Wanted a moment to connect with him. And also what I realized is that in my already thought bucket about the coronavirus, I had overpopulated it to the worst case scenario outcomes. I didn't catch it, right? And I want to also bring my mind to the hope, to the gratitude, to the recovery. Like I don't pay attention to the recovering numbers climbing, but I can tell you what thousand of people we've lost both in the United States and globally. I can give you that data because that's what I've been noticing, because that's what my fear-based self noticed. But there are also these other stories, right? And what if your first thought through, we'll go back to this picture, what if your first thought through about the coronavirus epidemic, the pandemic, big picture up there, what if your first thought through wasn't a fear-based one? Or even what if your first thought through is fear-based, but you noticed it more often and you redirected sooner so that it wasn't the predominant thoughts that you have about it? How we navigate these days is going to largely depend on what thoughts come through first, what ones are we noticing them, are we releasing them, are we noticing how that thought takes us off of our value guided path? All of that is so critically important. I'm just making sure I put my clock back, because if I don't put a clock in front of us, we'll be here till next Tuesday. So I'm hoping this is helpful, and I do want to give you some moments. I know we're going to run out of time a little bit, but I'm willing to hang here. If you have to go, go ahead and go. But if anybody's got a big question about how that works, I'd like to know it. And Megan, you'll have to ask me.
So I'm going to start with one that's very related to the conversation you just finished, which is, so can you talk a little bit about the attached thought buckets, and can you pull out a wiser thought? Can the ATT contain good thoughts, or is it only your bad thoughts?
Love this question. I didn't even give her that question in advance. That's just out there. Yes. There are positive thoughts. They're like beautiful thoughts. There's like beautiful thoughts. I have beautiful rules. Like I'm a good listener. Like I tend to have that thought. There are times when that thought's not actually useful or helpful or relevant either. So there are times when going with an already thought is very in line with my values, and there's no issue. There's no problem. It's not like all already thoughts are bad. Otherwise, why would be in the business of education, right? But those aren't the only thoughts that I can have. So I don't have to go with just what I already know. Attachment to what I already know and protecting it at all costs is how we get in so much difficulty across differences. Like my way is the right way. My political view is the right way or the only way. So what I would say is we want to make space for new thoughts. That the already thoughts are the ones we go to first because we had them. Next week, I'll be talking about some different metaphors about thoughts. So we'll get into this a little bit more. But the big thing I would want you to have now, otherwise you're going to be really mad at me next week because you're going to be struggling with your thought. Oh, I just lost it. It's in the question. It was like, can I root around in there and find a better thought? And what I want you to know is it's not, you don't even have to be that effortful. A lot of times affirmation or the power of positive thinking or sometimes positive psychology kind of get up in my grill because they're kind of this idea that this is not a good thought and I should replace it with this better thought. And so then sometimes that's how we get into thought battles. Like, I think this and like, no, I should think that instead. Like, and then I get into like, this kind of a quality, angel devil thoughts, like a debate in my head. You don't have to find the thought you need to bump it out. It's not like curling where like that stone gets there and this one has to come knock that out. as you pull your attention away in some meditative or mindful moment, you release that thought. It's like letting go of a balloon. It's just going to go. Now your thought field is open, and you could reflect and possibly have a brand new thought come that you've never had before. That's what happened in the situation I was dealing with over the weekend. I had fear-based thoughts. I saw it, I got quiet, then I asked myself, what are some creative ideas I might not have thought about yet that might be better for me to kind of go with? And then I'd have this idea, and then that one wouldn't work out. Then I had this idea, and then that one wouldn't work out. Returning to all the possible thoughts, the well of being, all the well of thoughts. If you let go of one that's not helpful, another one will come on its own. You don't have to effort to replace it. I think I'll leave that one there. And give time maybe for one or two more, Megan, and then I'll try to speak to the questions I get. You'll notice in the folder there's a response sheet with I spent time with your questions from last week.
Okay, so and there's several in here, and like I say, we'll try and address those, but how can you manage, and I think this goes back to the thoughts, how do you manage both your own thoughts and feelings, or how do you work with someone and manage through that conflict if they're having a thought or feeling? What strategies can they use?
The first thing, and for this early learning, and I want you to focus on you. Somebody else may be having a reactive thought, and if you go after the thought and you try to take that thought, it's going to get worse. If you could see it like if you're attached to a thought and the other person's attached to a thought, you're going to have a thought battle. You really want to make sure that you're moving to quiet so you can have a new experience, and then be asking yourself, what's the best way I can navigate so that I can take care of myself? Maybe I'm just going to go away for a minute. Or what can I say? What you really want to go, like ultimately we want that other person to start to become aware that they're having a reaction and to be able to come back to that. But if in the middle of a thought thing, if you try to address it then when they don't have this knowledge, there could be issues with that. So I would want you to I always say I'm never going to say this really pithy thing about putting your own mask on before the others, but I kind of just did. You got to make sure that you're grounded and centered and curious and coming from a value-guided place, or your reactive self is likely to try to take that on, and you're going to probably be judgmental or whatever. If somebody's reacting and they're caught up in a thought and they're presenting danger to you, you need to get away. And sometimes when my kid's having a reaction or something, after things are settled, I can kind of come back and talk about that. That might be safe. But really important to have this learning be about you. It's so easy to flip out and think that I would feel better if they would stop having that thought. You want to separate that out because there's no freedom in that equation.
So the other question is, what is your definition of a fact? Is it tied to circumstances?
That's bigger than I can answer in the amount of time. Because there's like my truth and my knowing, and then there's like a belief that I have. Sometimes a belief I have is not based in fact, but I feel like it's a belief, and I might have at one point in my life said that's a fact. Science has some data and facts, but I also will say that science is compromised at times because there's political agendas that are backed behind science. Science is manipulated in some way sometimes, and then also not. So So it's a really big question. Ultimately, I would want you to be curious about the thoughts that you're thinking about. Ultimately, we get to decide what we're going to choose to believe. I just want that to come from a place of wise consideration rather than just what we've been taught is true. Where what we've been taught is true is part of the dominant cultural drumbeat and may not actually have all the accurate perspectives involved.
Okay, there's several more coming in, but I think I want to have you take a moment and leave them with the things that they can do so that they can experience a calmer, more centered weekend if possible?
That's the plan. So thank you for that, Megan. So just some suggestions for the week. Really enjoying the episodes of this podcast that I've had a chance to listen to so far. This podcast got launched in the middle of this pandemic, so the examples and things that Brené's talking about with people are very relevant to what's going on today. And she is talking about emotional health and shame resilience. And I just think there's a lot of good things to get out. So you might want to be checking that out along the way. Remembering the both and of emotions. I love this image. Yes, we can feel grateful and disappointed about things being canceled. Yes, we can enjoy extra time with loved ones and feel overwhelmed by their presence. I can feel really grateful to have some time to prepare this training and miss my wife. We can be hopeful and feel like everything is falling apart. So just, again, making space for more than one experience. I think that will help you have, I can be really upset and still love this person. It sort of helps that. I just threw this in there just to remind you that if different moments, like the sort of the trauma of what we're experiencing is going to have, we need a trauma-informed approach. So I wouldn't mind you sitting with and just taking in this woman's words. I think that it's very spot on, including the bottom one, when in the midst of trauma, just getting by emotionally and functionally is okay. Like you're going to have some experiences where you're just getting through. Lowering expectations and being kind to yourself and others is vital. And so check your expectations of yourself and other people this weekend, and that should help you also have a calmer weekend. This article, I think, really helpful to kind of pay attention to, sort of describing the different kinds of grief that we're actually dealing with. Like the grief app is open in the background, which is like the back of like the fogginess behind this person. Like the grief is in the background all the time. And there's a link between grieving, anticipatory grief, which is, things we're fearing down the road, we don't actually even have to feel, and anxiety. And so that's a pretty good read. Ultimately, your homework is to be reflecting again on these things that I want you to be noticing. We'll be checking in about that next time. Practice your reset skills. Practice, as you go through your experience. So that's it for today. And I will be back with you again next Friday. And Megan and I will be back with you again next Friday. If you have questions or concerns, feel free to email me. Really appreciate it if you'll do the survey so we can continue to shape the class as a community. Take very good care. Take care of the folks around you, and we'll see you next time.